Once upon a time, there lived a very wealthy young man named Kenneth, the son of the wealthiest man in the village. His father, Chief Emeka, had passed away a few years earlier, leaving all his wealth to Kenneth, his only child. Despite his father's fortune, Kenneth worked hard and spent little to no time socializing with the villagers. His only friend was Chidi, the son of their housekeeper. After Chief Emeka's death, Chidi's mother remained in her role as housekeeper to help the family cope with their loss. Kenneth and Chidi had grown up together and become best friends. Despite Chidi's humble background, their bond was stronger than that of blood brothers, and Kenneth entrusted Chidi with managing their factory, showing the depth of their friendship. One day, while Kenneth was chatting with Chidi, his mother entered the room looking extremely worried. Kenneth immediately asked what was wrong. She explained that the time had come for him to find a wife. She was not getting any younger and wanted to see her grandchildren before she passed away. Kenneth grumbled in response, revealing that marriage was the last thing on his mind. Knowing how stubborn her son could be, Kenneth's mother pleaded with Chidi to convince him to find a wife. Chidi promised to talk to Kenneth, and after she left, he did everything he could to persuade his friend. However, Kenneth was not interested in getting married. He believed that women were deceptive and couldn't risk falling into the hands of a devious one. Kenneth's mistrust stemmed from a past experience. A few years before, he had fallen in love with a woman without realizing she was married. They spent a lot of time together, but eventually, he found out she was not only married but had children with her husband. This revelation broke Kenneth's heart, leaving him unable to trust another woman. Understanding what Kenneth had gone through, Chidi reassured him that good women still existed. He advised Kenneth not to judge all women based on one person's mistakes and urged him to give love another try. After some persuasion, Kenneth promised to think about it. A few weeks later, Kenneth came across an extremely beautiful woman who was returning home from the farm with her mother. Her name was Chiamaka, the only daughter of Mazi Chukwu, the village carpenter. While Kenneth and Chiamaka exchanged an electrifying glance, something inside him softened. For days, all Kenneth could think about was Chiamaka. He realized how happy he felt and decided to go know her better. They spent time talking, getting to know one another, and soon fell deeply in love. It was a love like no other, and Kenneth eventually married Chiamaka. His mother was overjoyed to witness the marriage ceremony of her son. She eagerly awaited grandchildren and never hesitated to express her desire for them. Kenneth and his wife Chiamaka began to live happily. This was an exciting time for Kenneth, who was head over heels in love with Chiamaka. A few weeks later, Chiamaka became pregnant, and Kenneth could not contain his excitement. His mother, on hearing the good news, jubilated and went to hug Chiamaka. Suddenly, something strange happened. She slumped to the floor and died on the spot. Kenneth froze in shock, struggling to make sense of his mother's sudden death. His friend Chidi tried to console him, but Kenneth was inconsolable. He couldn't believe that his mother was gone. As they stood there confused, news reached Kenneth that his factory had gone up in flames. Everything he had worked for vanished before his eyes, leaving him devastated beyond words. The weight of these successive tragedies was too much for him to bear, and he watched helplessly as his world crumbled. The joy that had once filled his heart was now replaced with deep sorrow. Chidi's ever-loving, loyal friend stood by Kenneth's side, offering support and comfort. He encouraged Kenneth to stay strong for his unborn child and to keep hope alive. Despite the overwhelming grief, Kenneth realized he had to pull himself together for the sake of his family. A few days after his mother's burial, Kenneth narrowly escaped a terrible accident that almost cost him his life. When he returned home that evening, he could hardly believe he was still alive. Later that night, he went to bed with his wife, only to be awoken by the smell of smoke. Kenneth opened his eyes and realized that their house was on fire. He rushed out immediately with his wife and watched as their home burned to the ground. This was a devastating sight for Kenneth. He began to wonder why such terrible things were happening to him. With nowhere else to go, Kenneth and his wife decided to go live with his friend, Chidi, who welcomed them with an open arms. Chidi's mother, who had been their housekeeper for many years, stepped in to play the role of a mother to Kenneth. She knew how much the death of his mother had hurt him and how his recent losses had affected his life. So she stepped in to ensure that Kenneth didn't fall into depression. However, Kenneth couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. As the days passed, he grew more paranoid, consumed by the fear that his family was under a curse. He decided to speak to Chidi's mother, who had become like a mother to him. He confided in her about his suspicions. Chidi's mother, after listening to everything he said, advised Kenneth not to jump into conclusions. She explained that sometimes bad things happen without any reason and that he shouldn't blame himself for things beyond his control. Despite her words, Kenneth couldn't get his suspicions out of his mind. That night, he had a dream in which his late mother appeared to him, claiming that his wife, Chiamaka, was the cause of all his misfortunes. She told him that Chiamaka and her unborn child were cursed and warned that if he failed to send them away, more terrible things would happen to him. Kenneth woke up from his sleep confused and distraught. He couldn't believe that his wife, Chiamaka, could be behind all his suffering. He woke her up and ordered her out of his friend's house, calling her cursed and accusing her of causing all his misfortunes. Chiamaka, bewildered by her husband's sudden outburst, pleaded with him to believe in her innocence. However, Kenneth remained adamant and forced her out of his house. The commotion attracted Chidi and his mother, who rushed in to find out what was happening. They began to plead with Kenneth not to send his wife away. Chidi's mother pulled Kenneth aside and advised him not to take such drastic measures without being absolutely sure that his accusations were true. Kenneth narrated his dream to Chidi's mother, who advised him that dreams could sometimes be misleading. She suggested he consult the village seer before taking any drastic action. Kenneth agreed and set out to visit the seer. When he arrived at the seer's hut, the seer told him that the curse was hovering over his wife and their unborn child. The seer revealed that his wife was indeed cursed and that this curse was the source of all his misfortunes. When Kenneth asked what he should do, the seer instructed him to send her away, warning that if he did not, something more sinister would happen. Now convinced that his wife was cursed, Kenneth returned home and pushed Chiamaka out of the house, warning her never to come near him again. Chiamaka cried bitterly as she made her way back to her family. Her father, Maazi Chukwu, was shocked to see her at home and asked what had happened. Chiamaka recounted the entire ordeal, and her father reassured her that everything would be all right. As weeks turned into months, Kenneth struggled to make ends meet continually. Nothing seemed to work, so he eventually took up a job on a farm to survive. The entire village watched in shock as Kenneth fell from grace to poverty, unable to stop wondering what Chiamaka had done to attract such a curse into her life. Meanwhile, Chiamaka continued to live with her parents, It wasn't easy for her as the villagers shunned and avoided her because of the rumor curse. A few months later, she gave birth to a handsome baby boy who looked exactly like Kenneth. Despite the fact that he reminded her of all the sufferings she had endured, Chiamaka was grateful for her son. She resolved to show him all the love that the world had tried to deprive him of. Kenneth, on the other hand, was still living with his friend Chidi, who had started to make a lot of money. Chidi had run into a very wealthy woman who put him in charge of her businesses. Within a few months, Chidi made a fortune and opened his own business. He offered Kenneth a job, which Kenneth gladly accepted, thanking Chidi for being such a wonderful friend. However, before Kenneth could begin his new job, something strange happened. One morning, he woke up to find his legs swollen. He was rushed to the village healer's hut, where the healer did everything possible to treat his leg, but nothing worked. With each passing day, his legs swelled even more. Devastated, Kenneth was confined in his bed, helplessly watching as Chidi thrived in his business and made even more money. One night, Chiamaka had a terrifying dream about Kenneth. She saw him dead and alone by the side of the river. She woke up, shaking and terrified. Unable to shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong, Chiamaka shared the dream with her father, who advised her to visit Kenneth immediately. Chiamaka quickly rushed to Kenneth's friend's house, where she met Chidi's mother. She informed Chiamaka that Kenneth no longer lived with them. She explained that Kenneth and Chidi had a big fight a few days earlier, after which Kenneth left the house angrily and hadn't returned. Chiamaka stood there, puzzled, wondering where Kenneth could have gone. She asked around the village, but no one had seen him. Worried, she returned home, only to realize she had left her bag near Chidi's house while speaking with the neighbors. Determined to retrieve it, Chiamaka decided to go back for her bag. When Chiamaka arrived at the house, she heard a sneeze from inside. It sounded just like Kenneth's. So she walked in and found him lying helplessly on a bed. He was extremely weak and unable to walk because of his swollen leg, which had now begun to rot. Without wasting time, Chiamaka took Kenneth away. A few hours later, Chidi and his mother returned to find Kenneth gone. They began to panic, wondering where he could have gone. They searched the entire place, but Kenneth was nowhere to be found. "What are we going to do, Mama?" Chidi asked, panic evident in his voice. His mother stood in deep thought. "We cannot let him get help," Chidi continued, pacing from one corner of the room to the other. As they stood there deliberating on what to do, they were suddenly struck by madness. They began to laugh hysterically, their sanity slipping away. Meanwhile, Kenneth, who had been bedridden for months, started to regain his health. The chief priest of the village had washed away the charms placed on him by Chidi and his evil mother. All the time, Kenneth had no idea that he had been living with the very people responsible for his misfortunes. Years ago, Chidi's mother had gotten pregnant by Kenneth's father, Chief Emeka. When she threatened to reveal his identity as Chidi's father, Chief Emeka threatened to kill her if she ever spoke of it. Desperate, she agreed to keep the secret on the condition that she could continue working as a maid in his household. Chief Emeka, eager to hide the truth, agreed. Years later, Chidi's mother visited Isia to look into the destinies of both Chidi and Kenneth. The seer revealed that Kenneth was destined to become very wealthy, while Chidi was fated to struggle his entire life. Unable to bear the thought of her son living in poverty, Chidi's mother hatched a plan to swap their destinies. She confided in Chidi about the revelation and he joined her in carrying out their sinister plot. They pretended to love and care for Kenneth to gain his trust, making it easier for them to execute their evil plans unnoticed. They then sought the help of a juju man who agreed to perform the dark ritual necessary to swap their destinies. However, he warned them that Chiamaka posed a problem because of her strong spirit, which could hinder the plans. Determined to succeed, Chidi and his mother manipulated Kenneth's dream and planted false evidence to make Chiamaka appear to be the source of his misfortunes. This led to Kenneth sending her away, clearing the path for them to complete the ritual. With Chiamaka gone, they successfully swapped destinies, rendering Kenneth poor while Chidi began to prosper. What they did not anticipate was Chiamaka's return. She took Kenneth to her father, who immediately recognized the signs of evil surrounding him. Maazi Chukwu, being wise and knowledgeable in traditional matters, called upon the village chief priest. The village chief priest reversed the dark spell, setting Kenneth free from the curse that had plagued his life. The chief priest had narrated everything to Kenneth, who was shocked to learn that Chidi and his mother were behind all his misfortunes, including his mother's death. The revelation that Chidi was actually his brother broke Kenneth's heart and he burst into tears. Kenneth was deeply grateful to Chiamaka for saving his life. He apologized for ever doubting her innocence. Seeing how remorseful he was, Chiamaka forgave him, and Kenneth vowed to make up for all the pain he had caused her. Meanwhile, Chidi and his mother, now in their mad state, roamed the village streets, confessing their crimes to anyone who would listen. The entire village was thrown into shock, as they never believed that Chidi and his mother were capable of such evil. The village elders, horrified by the extent of their wrongdoing, banished them from the village. With Chiamaka by his side, Kenneth gradually rebuilt all that he had lost. He raised his son, Obinna, and lived happily with his wife, who proved to be his strongest pillar of support. After a few years, Kenneth regained his wealth, becoming even richer than he ever was before. The lesson to be learned from this story is that the evil you do will eventually come back to haunt you. Therefore, stay clear of evil and live in peace with others. Do not let jealousy drive you to actions that could destroy your life. Learn to be content with what you have and work hard to achieve your dreams. Remember that trust and loyalty are invaluable, but one must always be cautious of those who may harbor hidden intentions. In the end, this story reminds us that while life may throw unforeseen challenges our way, staying true to one's principle, remaining hopeful, and surrounding oneself with genuine and supportive people can help overcome even the darkest times. Subscribe for more interesting stories like this.